So guys, I want to do this black fatigue video and I want to talk about like two different issues. So in this video, I'll talk about white people laughing at black people and kind of the issue of black people being buffoons. And there's a lot of different stories that I can tell with you guys, but I do want to talk about, once again, my experience with the 48-hour film project that, a few years ago, I did the competition in 2016 for New Haven, and I had an issue with the event runner of that event. And I remember in many emails, they were instigating me, and they were accusing me of cheating, and they were accusing me of, being a sore loser, or asking the president of the competition if that I should win or whatever, when that was not true. So they were instigating me. And then I also expressed to an audience that struggled with suicidal thoughts and depression. I'm trying to use all the hurt and the anger and the emotions of that to empower my writing, really. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about it and just go through all of this and talk about, the issue of almost like, being disrespected by white people or being clowned by white people. So the first part of it is that I had an issue with this event runner, and she wasn't that professional, so I reported her to the president of the company, to the president of the 48-hour film project. So the following year I registered, and online she was saying things she's happy to have me back, and then she was saying things to me in a follow-up email. I hope you don't go around telling the president of the competition you should win. I hope you appreciate all my hard work. I hope you learn winnings and everything. It's like a lot of snarky remarks. So that kind of stems into like what we see with many situations when it comes to black people, with how sometimes, maybe white people are not as forgiving, or sometimes it goes down to the house Negro stereotype, where you had a bad experience with somebody, or a bad experience with a white person, but you just have the need to come back and come back and come back. Or you may just be like, okay, well, even if this person is disrespecting me, I still feel a need to kind of come back and be a part of this. Like, that's just like, with black people who work at certain jobs, and they're disrespected by white bosses or white supervisors, but they kind of kiss up to them because they have low self-esteem. Or some black people who do film festivals like I did, and just like, I'm always there when I'm being disrespected, like not realizing that they don't want you there, and they'll go as far as to give you a bad experience, really. Like that does unfortunately happen in filmmaking, where you may meet a bunch of like mean people who don't have your best interests. So it kind of comes down to, just like, as I said, the lack of black self-esteem, which is an issue in the black community, with like, because you've been teared down so many times, or you feel like you want to prove yourself, or sometimes you're like, well, I see all the black people acting ghetto and gangster, so I want to like prove myself to white people. So part of that is just like, not having the self-control to put yourself in better environments. And then I'll go a little bit further, that at the event, I was mad because what happened was that my father, Kevin Lembo, ran for governor of Connecticut. He did a commercial mentioning that me and my brothers were all autistic and special needs and other things like that. And I felt very hurt because that's not true. I was misdiagnosed with autism. So, I felt very humiliated, and I decided to blow up on stage and talk about how I struggle with suicidal thoughts and how that influenced my writing. Because there was a question that was asked, what influenced the writing of your screenplays when you do the 48-hour film project? And I should have just said, I've gone through a couple of rough years, but everybody goes through rough times. I'm trying to use the pain of the rough times and the emotions and tell very powerful stories. Like, ultimately, instead of allowing my emotions to tear me down and my trauma to tear me down, I'm trying to use all those feelings to tell some very powerful stories, because every great story it carries powerful emotions. It creates emotions within the audience. I should have said something like that, really, but I felt very, very hurt because what my father did. And I actually told myself, when I was telling the audience I was inspired by Dostoevsky and Ernest Hemingway and James Baldwin, I said to myself, maybe the audience thinks that I have autism or Asperger's syndrome. Maybe they're like, wow, I'm impressed that a black man knows these things, because black men are not that cultured. So it kind of goes down to a couple of things that happens a lot, where unfortunately, there's white people who like to humiliate black people. Like, honestly, when my dad was running for governor of Connecticut, to go on commercials and call me autistic when I'm not autistic, to have my baby pictures and be like winking into the camera and other things like that. Like, oh, well, that's my son, really. And many white people do that. Like, many white people objectify black people in their life, or sometimes when they adopt black children, they will objectify that. And I think that my solution is to that is that you should not let that hurt your self-esteem. I can even do a film talk about how ignorant my father is and get back at him. Or, my dad was running for governor. I could have done a follow-up video and talk about some things that were not good about him, like how there was some domestic violence, there's some animal abuse that he did. I remember one time we had a dog, and my dad, and he kept yelping in the middle of the night. So my dad picked him up while I was in the dog crate, threw the dog crate down a flight of stairs, and he said to me, like, I think the following night when he talked about it, he's like, I was a little worried that I almost broke his neck, really. Or one time my brother was beating me up, so my dad just like did the Homer Simpson strangle to him, and my brother had big like eyeballs, like kind of like that look. So sometimes, when white people disrespect us or they clown us, sometimes we got to play fire with fire, really. Like, so sometimes we got to keep the evidence, to say, really. And then also with the city producer disrespecting me, I should have really done that as well, really. I should have said, hey, you know what? I should keep evidence on how you are disrespecting me. Like, keep the emails, post those emails online, show it to the president of the competition, say, hey, you know what, I'm being consistently disrespected by this person. So, I'm going to try to open the blinds get a little bit more light in here. But, sorry guys, just trying to get a little bit more light in my video. But yeah, the thing about it is that happens a lot with black people, is that there's a lot of times white people will disrespect black people and think that they can get away with it. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why it does happen, really. But it also comes down to that racial roles. Like, a lot of people don't realize, but one of the reasons why a lot of like racism against African Americans happened was because it started out as a joke, really. Like, there was a lot of old propaganda in the 1800s advertisements where you show black people stealing, black people eating chicken, black people not speaking English that well. And a lot of people don't know this, but in the 1800s, chicken was a very abundant animal. And that's why black people ate a lot of chicken back then. So, white people turned that into negative stereotypes of the fried chicken eater. Or the reason where the fried chicken stereotype comes from is that black people steal chicken. So they love fried chicken so much they're willing to steal chickens and not get it the right way. But a lot of times when you are disrespected as a black person by white people or by jobs or whatever, you always have to kind of keep a track record and other things like that. And you also have to keep a track record of how they respond. Like with my issue of the 40-hour film project, with how they treated me, or how my father ran for governor of Connecticut, and he actually just chose to intentionally disrespect me by doing ads, showing my baby pictures and saying that he adopted 3 black kids with autism, and just to look like a white savior. So instead of counterattacking, I chose to self-destruct, really. And this also happens to a lot of black people. A lot of black people self-destruct, really, because sometimes, again, we have mental health issues. And at that time I was dealing with PTSD, and I was told by many white people, including my white therapist, my dad, suck it up, move on, because I was almost murdered by the police. I struggled with suicidal thoughts and depression. I worked at a job, was robbed by its own security guards, been sexually harassed. So that happens to a lot of black people as well, really, where they're taught, oh, well, instead of going through this you're going through a hard time, really, so you need to really just suck it up. You need to work hard, move on, move forward. And we also don't realize that sometimes what happens to us is that there's a lot of white sabotage. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of white people clown black people, because they're like, okay, you know what? That's your role, really. It's your role to be, the pain in the ass. It's your role to be the troublemaker. It's your role to be disrespected. It's your role to be like, okay, people are thinking highly of you. They think you're articulate, but we want to remind you of your place. And your place is just to be, the pain in the ass, the asshole, and other things like that, So it's definitely, a little just, it's a little just I'm a little sad that it's like that, but that's just how it is, really. And that's how I felt with the 48 when I did it, that it was her goal to be like, okay, you know what, I'm not a professional person. But the other thing too is that when you have somebody instigating you and giving you bad experience and bad time, and they're pushing your buttons and they're disrespecting you, that's totally different than somebody just going in with disruptive behavior. And then the other part of it is that, if you look at, what I've been through, and I've told them what I've been through about my father and other things, they're like, oh, well, we don't want to hear any of it, when that's kind of like, that shapes some understanding, really. So, and then that happens to a lot of black people as well, really, when they deal with a lot of white people, is that when they're disrespected, a lot of white people don't care about their backstories, the things they've been through. It's almost like, you messed up one time and that's all I see. I don't see the backstory. I don't care to understand your backstory. But if it's one of their white friends messing up, they care to understand their backstory. So, to get on with it, I self-destruct. I told the audience that, first of all, I said, like, I've gone down a bad path the past couple of years. I did some things that could have landed me in jail. And then I told the audience I struggle with suicidal thoughts. And I remember, like, the city producer, she was like kind of like, I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to you self-destructing. And then she was doing things like, and look at our friends like, and like I told you, some people may think that I'm autistic. So she was almost like, as I said, just trying to come off like, a nasty white person, or just like, like, oh, well, he must be a stupid autistic African nigger, to fuck around with, really. And then they're playing on their phones. When she was playing on her phone, she was bending over, so her breasts were exposed. She was sitting with her legs open. So maybe she was trying to be like, okay, and probably in a way, just be like, okay, you know what? If you look at me, I'm going to say that you are being a pervert as well, really, when she's actually just kind of instigating. And I kind of learned in psychology that what happens to a bunch of people, in situations like this, is that, maybe she kind of felt like she likes to manipulate people, or feel like she's powerful by manipulating people. And she chose to just treat me that way, really. But the other part of it was, it kind of goes down to what I've said on my side about giving in and getting angrier and angrier, because I shared that struggle, suicidal thoughts. I mentioned how I was almost shot at the store by the person robbing the store. I remember how I was almost shot by the police. I said I struggled with suicidal thoughts. I had nightmares where I was dismembering myself. And I also mentioned suicide attempts, and saying that, as a filmmaker, I dig into this trauma and this hurt and these memories to influence my writing, because I dig from really, really powerful places. And there's plenty of famous writers like Dostoevsky and other ones who do that in their writing. So it's just, unfortunate that happened, really. But I also felt I had no sense of self-control at that time, because I was kind of like, what, that's my role. It's to be the clown. It's to be not taken seriously. And then ultimately kind of goes down to that old saying: if people don't take you seriously, why build a house, really? Why build a house around them? Why plant a tent around them? Because if they don't take you seriously, it just means that they just don't really care about you. And they'll never care about you. And then ultimately, too, some people are very vindictive. So they're supposed to run events, they're supposed to run film festivals, and they're supposed to be professional, but they're kind of like, what, there's, and especially the film industry, there's a lot of people coming and going, having those big Hollywood dreams. So some people are like, what, if I fuck with a couple of them, it's not going to matter, because most of the times it's coming and going, really. So, I just think that that's just really, really unfortunate that it happened like that. But I understand, too, that I got angry and I got instigated. And that happens to a lot of black people as well, really, is that they don't understand emotional intelligence. Because a lot of times white people use that against you. And a lot of times, you just have to work on counterattacks. Like, honestly, in life, it's like being a lawyer. Like, honestly, as I said, what would happen if I kept the emails and I put it online? What would happen if I spoke out a few years ago about how her friends were saying things to me like, it's great that black people are doing the competition. Why don't you want to work? Why don't you want to join our teams that blacks work with blacks, or you want to work with other blacks? And other things like that, really. So you keep a track record. And then the other thing, too, is that, sometimes family doesn't respect you. And I've actually said this many, many times that, the fact that my father was running for governor of Connecticut, he sold me out. He lied about my disability and mental health issues to get himself elected. He didn't get elected, he got elected. I mean, he didn't get elected to governor. He actually stepped down, really. But when he was running for state comptroller, he did get elected. But the point of it was also just how a little just about like how sometimes family will sell you out, and I hate even saying this. Sometimes you got to counterattack. Like honestly, and it would have been right, but I could have easily done something like hey, I could have just spoke shit about my father, and yeah, I could have spoke a lot of shit about my father, and try to like embarrass him really and say like, hey, this guy's running for governor, but this is a guy who's done animal abuse. This is a guy who he was joking around with me one time when we were kids, and he did the Homer Simpson strangle, and he legitimately strangled my older brother because my brother was like beating me up one day and was scratching my arm and went too far. Or I remember I'll talk about this in another video that I used to have like skin blots all over my body because I ran track. And my dad would always be punching the bathroom door. One time he made me pay him $5 because I took too long of a shower, really. So I remember after track never showering, and I developed bad skin conditions because, I could not even like sanitize myself because my father would be punching that door. Or I remember like one time I took a bath really, and I remember like how my other father was saying that he was very close to breaking down the door and looking at my naked body to see if I'm okay, really. Because, that says something when, you have family members that are all about, you're my kid. So that means if you take too long of a shower, I can rip down the door, see your naked body, and pull you out because you're my son, really. And my parents are gay, so that adds a little level of like kind of creepiness. And I hate talking about that, but that I'm telling you the truth, really. Because back when I was a kid, I was kind of raised that children are just like dogs. You can smack them, you can hit them. They're not human beings. You can do whatever to them. And that's never a good way to raise anybody, because that's going to teach somebody to grow up to be a sociopath. It's also going to teach somebody to grow up and have no self-esteem. And that's also going to teach somebody when people are clowning, disrespecting them, maybe just join in on that. So, and that's kind of what happened, really. She was kind of mocking me. And I felt my role was just to be the clown, just to be the disruptive, just to be the disturbed person, really. And very sad, really. And that's also bad because it's like what James Baldwin said in The Devil Finds Work, that, what happens is that there's a lot of times film can be hundreds of years in the future, but the reason why it's not is because of racism and because African Americans and part black people like myself are not allowed to give their best, really. And this is a classic example. This stemmed from me being disrespected the prior year when she read off the nominations and said, whatever film Byron created, sent me a very, probably a very mean and put down email about why my film was bad. And they actually gave somebody an acting award over my film because they said one line of dialogue. They didn't even look the camera in the face, really. It was a really crappy job. And they said whatever film Byron created was the other nomination. And then I report that. The president does nothing. Then I do the competition the next year. They have passive-aggressive attitude. They instigate me. And they were kind of finding humor into my self-destruction. But when I talked about struggling with suicidal thoughts and suicide attempts and digging into those memories to influence my writing, that's when they got sad and shell-shocked because I said something like, what, my life's gone downhill since I graduated college. I wish that I was shot in the back of the head. I wish I was killed that day. I would have loved to have been in the hospital bleeding out, and all the rats and the roaches that were in that store eating apart my dead body and stuff like that. And that was when they stopped and they got scared because it looked like two things. It looked like they pissed off the wrong person, because if somebody's talking like that, that they're angry and that they're crazy, and that it looks like your competition attracts bad people, really. And then I've come out with a story about how I was instigated and how people made racist comments to me and how there's been double standards and how that this person who ran the event, they were on the news for doing corruption at City Hall, and that's been on, news stations and other things like that. So if this person just learned to forgive and say like, hey, you know what? I know last year you went to Mark Rupert and we had some issues. I just hope that this doesn't happen again. I wish you well and you'll be treated fairly. that would have been different. But because this person chose not to do that, and instigated me, sometimes you don't realize what you create. And a lot of times when white people instigate black people, the last thing that they do is take accountability. So, and that's the big thing. It's easy to throw all the blame on somebody else instead of blaming yourself, really. It's easy for competitions and organizations to be like, okay, we're so big, we do so much goodwill to hundreds of people. If we screw over a couple of niggers, we're not going to care a little bit. So that's part of the black fatigue and everything like that as well, is that it also comes down to that, when you don't mean something to somebody or to an organization, they don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about how they hurt you. They're gonna be like, okay, here's the hundreds and thousands of people that we help out, so we're gonna give a fuck about those people that we care and give a shit about, really. So that's part of that black fatigue, really. But the important thing is that when it comes to black people and the role of being a buffoon, the role of being disrespected by white people, you just have to understand that sometimes it's calculated. Sometimes there's a reason why that's happening. And sometimes it could be vindictiveness. It could be jealousy. It could be like, okay, I don't see the talent in you, or we know that you're never going to be good here, so we want to just, have you feel uncomfortable enough not to come back, really. Or sometimes in the workplace, it's ultimately like, we don't want you to do your best, really, because your best hurts all of us, really. It makes all of us look bad. So, it's really, really unfortunate that, some black people deal with that as part of the black fatigue. So, what? Yes, black people do suffer from very low self-esteem. Yes, black people have been in roles since the slavery era of being the ones that are disrespected. There are times when you are in mostly white communities or in mostly white jobs or mostly white film festivals, and you're the only minority, and people want you to be in the role of the misbehaving African American. As James Baldwin said, they want you to be the bad nigger to be made an example of. So you have to kind of know when that's evident. And you also have to understand, too, when people don't like you or when people treat you differently or when you have bad experience, you really have to open your mouth and not come back, really. Never prove yourself to anybody who doesn't respect you. The way you do that is you find a place that builds you and you do well there. You don't go back to the same place and hoping things will be different. And then the next thing is also, too, that, none of you are clowns or buffoons. That's nobody. That's any race, that's any gender, that's anybody. You're not a clown, you're not a buffoon, really. So, don't be in that fucking role. If people hurt your self-esteem, you got to build self-esteem. Always believe in yourself. And ultimately, too, sometimes family doesn't believe in you. Sometimes family will only see you for your mental illness. Sometimes family will only see you for the bad choices that you made. But nobody's perfect. And ultimately, everybody has a form of antisocial disorder. Everybody has a form of mental health issues. But, it's unfortunate when some people like me come from families where the focus is always on mental illness and whatever, really. But like I said, it may be hard. But you have to really work hard on your self-esteem. Don't be somebody else's buffoon. You're not a clown, and do better.